My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you think about trust forever. I'm going to take you through an experience that broke me, remade me, and eventually led me to build this entire channel dedicated to sharing stories of betrayal, survival, and justice. 3 years ago, I was working a high-stress, demanding job at Morgan Stanley, one of the most prestigious and cutthroat investment banking firms in the entire world, located in the heart of Manhattan. I was commuting every single day from my apartment in Brooklyn to the offices in Midtown Manhattan, putting in 14-hour days, sometimes 16-hour days, trying to build something I thought was meaningful, something that would define my career trajectory and secure my financial future for decades to come. I was ambitious. I was driven. I believed that the sacrifices I was making would pay off in the long run. My colleagues seemed to accept the grind. My boss praised my work ethic. My paycheck reflected my value, or at least I thought it did. I had a best friend named Michelle, who I'd known since my undergraduate years at Northwestern University in Illinois. We were inseparable in every conceivable way. We texted constantly throughout the day, often sending each other memes and updates about our lives. We had lunch together at upscale Manhattan restaurants like Balthazar in Soho or Gramercy Tavern in Flatiron, places where we could talk about our dreams and fears over expensive martinis. We spent weekends together exploring art galleries in Chelsea, visiting museums like the MoMA and the Guggenheim, sometimes just walking through Central Park and talking about life. Michelle was the sister I never had. She knew my family, my insecurities, my deepest fears about whether I'd ever be good enough, successful enough, worthy enough. And then I had a house cleaner named Patricia, who came to my apartment every single Tuesday and Thursday, without fail. She'd been referred to me by a coworker at Morgan Stanley, Jennifer, who said Patricia was professional, thorough, honest, and affordable compared to other cleaning services in Brooklyn. I didn't think twice about leaving Patricia with my spare keys, the ones that opened my front door, my bedroom, my office, every intimate space in my home. She seemed trustworthy. She had multiple references from other wealthy families in Brooklyn Heights and Park Slope. She had a professional appearance, arrived on time every single visit, did excellent and thorough work. She knew how to clean delicate items. She treated my home with respect. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything went catastrophically wrong in ways I could never have anticipated or prepared for. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers with this channel. She said that nobody wanted to hear these kinds of stories, that they were too dark, too negative, too focused on betrayal and revenge. But I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. These stories matter. The experiences of victims matter. Help me show my mother and everyone else who doubted this project that these tales deserve to be heard. Please, I'm asking you directly, subscribe to Olive Revenge Stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Let's build a community where victims feel heard and empowered. Now, let's continue with what happened. It started with something so small, so trivial that I didn't even think twice about it initially. A luxury candle missing from my bathroom, specifically a Jo Malone candle that cost approximately $60. It was a beautiful scent, something like English pear and freesia, very sophisticated. I thought I'd moved it somewhere else in the apartment, or maybe I'd used it completely and thrown away the empty container. Then my favorite Estee Lauder Advanced Night Repair Serum disappeared from my nightstand. This was a product I used every single night before bed, a ritual I'd maintained for years. I was stressed about work during this period. Morgan Stanley was going through major downsizing that quarter. There were rumors constantly circulating about layoffs in my department. People were being called into closed-door meetings. I never knew when my turn might come. My anxiety was through the roof. My cortisol levels were probably sky-high. So I assumed I'd misplaced the serum, stuck it in a drawer somewhere, and forgot about it. Or maybe I'd used it more frequently than I thought and hadn't replaced it yet. The human mind is absolutely excellent at rationalizing small inconsistencies and discrepancies. We smooth over the rough edges. We construct narratives that make sense, Stories that don't involve betrayal or violation, or the shattering of our assumptions about humanity. We don't immediately assume that someone is stealing from us. We assume we're forgetful. We assume we're losing our minds a little bit. We assume there are logical explanations for everything. That's how Patricia got away with it for so long. That's how a woman I'd invited into my home. That's how Margaret Chin managed to steal from me methodically for 8 months before I figured out what was happening. That's 8 months of my vulnerability being exploited. That's 8 months of her walking through my apartment like she owned it. I remember the exact day I decided to check the security footage. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March of that year, and I was at the Morgan Stanley office, sitting at my desk on the 42nd floor with a view of the Midtown Manhattan skyline, all those impressive buildings and the bustling streets below filled with millions of people going about their lives, when my coworker Jennifer mentioned something that made my blood go cold. She mentioned casually that her house cleaner had been stealing from her. Not just small things. Big things. Jennifer worked in the same department as me, same floor, same division of Morgan Stanley, and she looked pale. She was shaking. Her hands were trembling as she told me that her Rolex watch, a gift from her parents when she graduated from college, her Cartier bracelet, and $2,000 in cash had vanished over the course of just 2 months. She'd been absolutely devastated. She'd hired a company to investigate, and the police got involved very quickly. The house cleaner, a woman named Diane, had apparently been running this sophisticated scheme across Brooklyn and Manhattan for 3 full years. 3 years of stealing from people. 3 years of violating homes and trust, and the intimate spaces where people felt safe. That's when the coldness spread through my chest like ice water from the inside out. I realized in that moment that I might be another victim. I realized that the small things I'd been missing, the candle, the serum, other items I'd attributed to my own forgetfulness, might not be forgetfulness at all. I realized that Patricia might be a predator like Diane. I didn't panic. I didn't call the police immediately or confront Patricia at her next scheduled visit. Instead, I did something far more calculated, far more deliberate, and ultimately far more effective. I told my boss I was taking the rest of the day off due to a family emergency. I said it was urgent. I didn't explain further. I drove home from Manhattan to Brooklyn in absolute silence, not even listening to music or podcasts. I needed to think. My 2019 Mercedes C-Class felt like a coffin during that drive home. Every traffic light seemed to turn red just as I approached it. Every driver on the road seemed to move in slow motion deliberately in front of me. My mind was racing through possibilities, through memories, through every single time I'd left Patricia alone in my apartment. I had probably left her unsupervised for hours at a time. I'm sure she knew the layout better than anyone. When I finally got home, I went directly to my bedroom closet. My hands were shaking now. I opened the safe, the one hidden behind the winter coats that I thought absolutely nobody knew about, and checked the inventory very carefully, methodically documenting what was there and what was missing. My grandmother's diamond ring. The one she'd given to me on her deathbed when I was 23 years old. The one I was supposed to pass down to my own daughter someday. Gone. My mother's pearl necklace. The one she wore to my father's funeral. The one that held so much emotional weight for her and for me. Gone. $1,200 in emergency cash that I kept for truly unexpected situations, hidden in an envelope behind some old documents. Gone. My hands didn't shake anymore. My breath didn't quicken. But something inside me shifted fundamentally and irreversibly. Some baseline of my personality reorganized itself into something harder, something colder, something more strategic and calculating. It was like flipping a switch in my brain from victim to strategist. From emotional to logical. From vulnerable to fortified. That shift was something I needed in that moment. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my home security system, a Ring doorbell camera on the front entrance and 3 interior cameras that I'd installed after a break-in scare the previous year, and I started scrolling back through the footage very methodically, very systematically, looking for patterns. I didn't look at everything chronologically. I looked for the moments when Patricia was alone in my bedroom, my office, my bathroom. What I found made me feel sick in a way I'd never experienced before, but I wasn't shocked. She'd been going through my drawers systematically and methodically, like she was conducting an inventory assessment for a retail operation. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She moved with purpose and confidence, not hesitating, not looking over her shoulder, not showing any sign of guilt or anxiety. She photographed items on her phone before taking them, documenting her theft like it was inventory for a store. She was creating a record. The realization was horrifying because it meant this wasn't opportunistic stealing. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision by someone who needed money desperately. This was premeditated and strategic and calculated. This was a job to her. This was a business operation. She was a professional criminal. I called my bank immediately and put fraud alerts on all my credit cards through their security departments. I checked my identity through LifeLock, a service I'd been using since my job at Morgan Stanley exposed me to potential identity theft risks through data breaches and security concerns, and found that Patricia hadn't gone that far. Not yet. She hadn't opened accounts in my name or used my social security number or engaged in identity theft specifically. At least there was that mercy. The items she'd stolen were valuable enough, though, approximately $8,000 in jewelry, cash, and collectibles when you added it all up. Plus the emotional devastation of knowing that someone I'd invited into my home, someone I'd paid fairly every week, someone I'd treated with professional respect, had been systematically robbing me, violating my space, taking what was mine. I sat on my bed for 45 minutes without moving or speaking, not crying, not angry, just processing what this meant, who I was if someone could violate me this way, if my judgment was so completely wrong about people, if I was fundamentally unable to read character. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't call the police immediately like everyone else did. I would go deeper. I would find out how many other people she'd stolen from. I would document everything so meticulously and thoroughly that there could be absolutely no doubt, no way for her to deny it or escape accountability. And then I would make sure she faced consequences that went far beyond what the standard justice system typically offered. That sounds like a dark thought, I know. I understand how it sounds. But you have to understand my position. This woman had stolen from me. Yes, but she'd also stolen something else. She'd stolen my sense of safety in my own home. She'd made me paranoid about every person who enters my space. She'd violated every assumption I'd made about basic human decency and honesty. So, I started my investigation. First, I looked through the security footage more carefully, frame by frame, documenting every theft. I watched for the specific items she took and the exact dates she took them. Patricia came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. On Tuesdays, she spent more time in my bedroom, usually about 25 to 30 minutes just in that room alone, going through everything. On Thursdays, she focused on my office and the guest bedroom closet where I kept some valuable items. She had a system. She had a routine. She had a checklist. I created a spreadsheet, a detailed Excel document with color coding and timestamps, with dates, times, items stolen, their approximate values based on receipts I still had, and the exact video footage timestamps where the theft occurred. Then I did something that felt invasive and uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. I did a background check on Patricia using multiple services. I hired a private investigator named Tom Morrison from a reputable firm in Brooklyn. He cost me $4,000, which was a significant amount of money, but what he uncovered was worth every penny I spent. Patricia wasn't even her real name. Her actual name was Margaretchen. She had a criminal record in New Jersey from 15 years ago, breaking and entering, grand larceny, and receiving stolen goods. She'd served 3 years in Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women and had been living under an assumed name since her release, violating her parole conditions. She'd been systematically targeting wealthy professionals in Brooklyn and Manhattan, working as a house cleaner through an agency and stealing from them methodically and strategically. Tom found evidence that she'd victimized at least 23 other people over a 3-year period. 23 different victims. Most of them, like Jennifer, had reported the thefts to the NYPD and filed insurance claims through companies like Allstate, State Farm, or other insurance providers. But nobody had connected the dots. Nobody had realized it was the same person committing all these crimes. That's when I realized what I had to do. I couldn't just call the police and file a report like everyone else had done without results. I had to do something that would actually stop her permanently and prevent her from victimizing anyone else. I had to document everything so meticulously, so perfectly, that there would be no way for her to deny it or escape the consequences through legal maneuvering or manipulation. Over the next 3 weeks, I did something that I'm not entirely proud of, but I'm absolutely not ashamed of either. I set up additional cameras in strategic locations throughout my apartment. I had Tom Morrison help me coordinate with 3 other victims in Brooklyn who were willing to participate in a larger investigation instead of just filing individual police reports. I documented everything Patricia did during her next 2 visits to my home in excruciating detail. On a Tuesday in early April, I watched her come through my front door. The Ring doorbell captured her face clearly, capturing her facial features, her expressions, the way she didn't hesitate or show any nervousness, and I watched her go directly to my bedroom closet like she'd memorized the layout perfectly. She knew exactly where to go because she'd been there before. She'd practiced this routine dozens of times. She spent 17 minutes in my bedroom, filling her large purse with items, a Tiffany bracelet that my grandmother had given me, 2 pairs of diamond earrings from my jewelry box, and a Target gift card that I'd been saving with $100 left on it. She didn't hesitate. She didn't check over her shoulder. She didn't show any guilt or anxiety or hesitation. She moved like a ghost through the rooms of my home, taking what she wanted, leaving no trace except the absence of what had been there before. I felt sick watching it happen. When she left, I called Tom Morrison immediately. We had enough. More than enough. We had irrefutable evidence. But I didn't call the police yet. Instead, I reached out to the detective in charge of Jennifer's case, a woman named Rebecca Torres at the NYPD in Brooklyn's South Brooklyn precinct. I told her what I'd found. I gave her the spreadsheet, the security footage in a format that could be used as evidence in court, the private investigator's report, and the contact information for the other victims who were willing to testify. I gave her everything I had, carefully organized and presented like evidence in a criminal case, like something that would hold up perfectly in court. Rebecca Torres moved fast. Within 2 weeks, Margaret Chen was arrested at her apartment in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Her apartment was filled with stolen goods from dozens of victims. The NYPD found items from at least 16 different victims scattered throughout her home. They found her fake IDs, her fake social security cards, multiple fake driver's licenses, and a notebook where she documented every address, every victim, every item she'd planned to steal. She'd been running this operation with military precision, like a CEO managing a retail store inventory system. The detective told me that my documentation had been absolutely crucial in building the case against her. Without my footage, my spreadsheet, and my investigation, Margaret might have continued operating for years. She might have stolen from hundreds more people. But here's where my story takes a different turn. Here's where I did something that the justice system wouldn't have done on its own. I attended every court hearing. I submitted detailed victim impact statements to the judge. I made sure that every judge, every lawyer, every official involved knew exactly who Margaret Chen was and what she'd done, the scope of her crimes, the number of victims. I didn't seek vengeance. I sought justice. I sought accountability. And I wanted Margaret to know that she couldn't just destroy people's lives and walk away without experiencing serious consequences. Margaret was convicted on 23 counts of grand larceny, 23 counts of breaking and entering, and 15 counts of identity theft-related crimes. She was sentenced to 8 years in Rikers Island Correctional Facility in New York. 8 years might not sound like a long time in the abstract, but when you're 52 years old, when you're serving time in a New York State prison with hardened criminals, when you're facing federal charges for identity theft and wire fraud, it's essentially a lifetime. The judge looked directly at Margaret when he handed down the sentence. He mentioned my case specifically, the detailed documentation, the security footage, the thorough investigation, the way I'd coordinated with other victims, as an example of what happens when victims decide to fight back intelligently instead of passively accepting their losses. I cried that day in court. Not out of sadness or anger, but out of relief, out of closure, out of knowing that I'd actually done something meaningful and important. But here's the lesson I learned through this entire experience, the lesson that took me months to fully understand and integrate. Justice isn't about punishment. Justice isn't about making someone suffer the way they made you suffer. Justice is about stopping the cycle. Justice is about making sure that someone like Margaret Chin doesn't get to hurt another person. Justice is about protecting future victims who haven't even become victims yet. And that's what I'd done. I'd protected future victims. I'd stopped a predator in her tracks. I'd used patience, strategy, and documentation instead of emotion, anger, and revenge. Some people asked me afterward if I regretted not confronting Margaret directly, not yelling at her, not letting her know that I'd figured it out. But I didn't regret my approach one bit. Confrontation would have given her the chance to deny everything, to manipulate me, to potentially destroy evidence or flee before the police could arrest her. Instead, by staying silent and methodical, by documenting everything, I'd given the police the gift of an airtight case that couldn't be disputed or challenged in court. Let me tell you what happened to the other victims. Jennifer got most of her jewelry back. The police recovered her Rolex watch from a pawn shop in Washington, D.C., and it was returned to her in pristine condition. 3 other victims recovered enough stolen goods to cover their losses and file successful insurance claims. The sense of violation didn't go away for any of us immediately. Some of us are still dealing with the emotional aftermath. But at least we had justice. At least we had the knowledge that Margaret Chin wasn't going to walk into anyone else's home and steal from them. At least we knew we'd protected other people from the same fate. That was worth more than any amount of money or personal revenge. My mother called me when she heard about the case on the news. It had made local news in Brooklyn on channels like NBC New York and New York One. She told me, "I'm proud of you," she said. Not for what happened to you, but for how you handled it. For how you didn't let anger consume you and drive you to do something you'd regret. My mother had always been the type of person who believed in justice over vengeance, in strategic thinking over emotional reactions. She'd raised me to think carefully, to plan ahead, to use my intelligence instead of my emotions. In that moment, I realized that she was absolutely right. The calm approach had been the correct approach all along. It had delivered better results than confrontation or revenge ever could have. Now, I want to talk about what I learned and what you should do if something like this happens to you. The first lesson is simple. Trust, but verify. Don't invite someone into your home without doing a basic background check first. Use services like Spokeo or Been Verified to check someone's history before you give them keys to your life. The second lesson is about documentation. If something feels wrong, if something seems off, document it carefully. Take screenshots. Save emails. Record video if you legally can. Build a case before you accuse anyone of anything. The third lesson is about patience. In a world that constantly tells us to react emotionally, to express our anger immediately, to confront people and explode, the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm. Stay methodical. Stay strategic. Let other people's emotions drive them off cliffs while you remain grounded and focused. The fourth lesson is about justice versus revenge. Revenge is personal. It's about making someone hurt the way they hurt you. But justice, real justice, is about stopping cycles, protecting others, and creating systems that prevent future harm. Justice is bigger than your individual wound. After Margaret was sentenced, I realized that I had more important work to do. I realized that one criminal imprisoned doesn't mean the system is fixed. I realized that other victims don't have the resources I had. That's when I started All of Revenge Stories. I wanted to create a platform where victims could share their experiences, where people who had been betrayed could learn from the mistakes of others. I started working with Detective Torres at the NYPD and developed a comprehensive training program for victims about how to document theft, how to gather evidence properly, and how to work with law enforcement to build stronger cases. I've now helped train over 200 victims across New York and New Jersey. 200 people who felt empowered. I also started a consulting business helping high-net-worth individuals implement security protocols in their homes. I partner with companies like Ring Security Systems and Wise Cameras to provide comprehensive security solutions. The experience with Margaret Chin transformed me completely. It showed me what I was capable of when I combined intelligence with justice. It showed me that trauma doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of your purpose. This is Sarah from All of Revenge Stories. If you want more stories like this, about workplace betrayals, friend group betrayals, family secrets that destroyed relationships, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm releasing new stories every day. Remember, stay calm, stay strategic, stay strong. See you.